Hello. So it's Sunday, and yes, I've had good naps today. I had a bit of a foray out, and I went to Blossom Vegetarian, I think it's called. It's the Thai veg place, where they have everything in Bain Marie, and you just make your choices. I haven't been there for ages, but it was satisfying and not heavy. Yeah, not too oily. So later on, I will make my own stir fry with rice. So I'm feeling really good about the fact that I've been taking it slow, but also getting some things in order in the house very slowly as well. Um, I did some journaling in the morning, and that really helped me clear my head because I guess I've had problems with returning to my creativity in terms of writing and stuff. But the feeling of stuckness when I started to write in the journal, um, I just felt like I cleared some of that just by writing in a journal. I mean, it's not for publication, right? It's not like I'm working with material. Instead, I'm working through a process. Maybe that's the essential difference between creative writing and journal writing. I don't know. But there is a relationship, clearly, because writers have always done it. Um, that relationship is sometimes clearer with certain writers, and that's why it's fascinating to be able to read their journals, even if they never expected them to be published. But thought for the day, Theosophical Society, the Theosophical Society. So you might have heard of someone called Madame Blavatsky. Well, she was a Russian spiritualist and basically the founder of this movement, which evolved kind of in, I guess, the mid 1800s to late 1800s. But why am I talking about it at all? Well, my aunt, one of my aunts, was really an important figure within the Perth branch of the Theosophical Society. She's deeply involved and kind of elevated as well. She lived to the age of 93 and she was still active in the society until she became unwell. She wrote for their newsletter, and so many concepts that were developed by Blavatsky and I guess her inheritors, which are inspired by elements of Hinduism and Buddhism, and that kind of reject mainstream Christianity, but not Jesus, because he's seen as being an ascended master. Those concepts are central to Theosophy, and my mum subscribed to them. And I think that a lot of her sort of collage or mosaic of beliefs were collated by the influence of my auntie. And I remember them having esoteric conversations whenever my auntie would come visit. That's why I wrote a poem to her called Bodhisattva, because it really was like having the Buddha herself visit when she came to visit. There are problematic elements in the history of Theosophy. There are also things that I guess even the concepts, which I haven't described in detail, I would question. And I would say, why not just turn to Buddhism? Why have this mishmash? Why have this sort of esoteric, notion of evolving yourself and having special powers and being somehow a master? It still has a messianic kind of quality, especially with the doctrine of the emergence of a world teacher. And a friend said to me, it sounds like a cult. And I'm like, well, I can see why you would say that. But by the same token, it's not coercive. It's actually a society of people who come together and they're not subject to surveillance or in the traditional sense of cults, like in Scientology or in, any number of others. It's not profiteering. It's actually probably a much smaller scale. But my auntie got into it, I think, in the 1950s in Perth, and that would have been unusual for a woman. I'm not sure if I've got the period right, but she went through a number of changes in her life. She was definitely very liberated in terms of her concept of women and their sexual freedoms, their ability to have agency and so on. And I think that she probably had some disagreements with my grandmother around those sorts of things about women's role and morality and stuff like that. But I'm not sure when it took the spiritual turn. I'm not sure if it was post-divorce. But she became very, very involved, and so did her daughter. Not that long ago, I happened to be in St Leonard's. I had to have some laser treatment, and I came across Blavatsky Lodge, and I was really struck, and I thought, I'm going to go in there and talk to the members of the society and try to make some kind of connection, because even though there are things that I think are problematic, and the sort of like idea of being not just the esoteric stuff, but also this tendency towards a superior knowledge, that others outside of Theosophy can't obtain. Well, they don't argue that. They draw on, as I said, texts from Hinduism. But I really wonder if in the family those sorts of precepts were a consequence, or interests in those precepts were a consequence of the long period of us being in India and trying to retrieve some sense of India as a place, because it really came about as a romanticization of so-called ancient civilizations, and India as being like a philosophical, spiritual powerhouse. Now, Blavatsky is a contentious figure herself, but by the time she died, there was a bit of a power struggle, and a few different figures and splits emerged. But one of the people that was really interesting was Annie Besant, and she ended up travelling to the headquarters of the Theosophical Society in Chennai, India. And she was really supportive of the independence movement, and she was an ally of Gandhi's, and the Theosophical Society actually supported the Indian National Congress that he headed up, and she was arrested by the British colonial authorities. So there is a kind of radical history there. The Theosophical Society began to retreat from those more political questions around the time of the growing prominence of Gandhi. But he always thanked them. So I don't know, like I've just been reading a bit more into it. I don't agree with the stuff about like the 7 races. Like, I don't mean like racial thinking, I mean human races and evolution and stuff. I think that is reminiscent of things like Scientology, and I don't think it has fundamentals to it. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think I would actually be party to mythologization. I think that the beauty of any kind of philosophical and spiritual inquiry is to work out how to live life, Dharma, and be kind. And I still, being a vegetarian, realised that some of that has family influences. My auntie was a lifelong vegetarian, and anyway, I just kind of spent part of the day thinking about those influences, and they're not necessarily bad on an individual level. because some of the branches of the society have kind of some degree of independence as well. They just invite you along to talks and they have libraries. Again, it's not coercive, so it's not really a cult.